think we should be live now, hopefully, fingers crossed.
All right, great.
Which is good. Excellent. Okay. So, introductions. Thanks everyone for joining the live stream. As always, it'll be recorded, so everybody can get to watch it afterwards. I think last time we had about 50, getting on to 1,000, 2,000 viewers in each of these. So
don't tell me those things.
Okay. No, it's not a lot of people. It's not a lot of people. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's good. Hang on a minute, I'll just shut this down. So today, the interview in the shed, we're joined by the amazing and fabulous Mr. Howie Weed.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited.
Thanks for inviting me.
So we'll probably spend about 40, 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending how we talk, and just go through a little bit of your absolutely outstanding career. I've got to say, I think you've been stalking me throughout my entire life, and literally you've just tried to work on my entire DVD collection. I think that's what you've been up to.
Well, you know, I tried to work on. I've always been a movie fan, so I try to work on as the most interesting stuff I can find. You know, and make it. That was one of the main reasons I wanted to work at Lucasfilm, because those were films that everybody was seeing. So, you know, that's huge. So. A lot of people work really hard on movies, and then these movies don't get seen. So, you know, working there, I knew at least, you know, I'd be working on great films with other great, you know, technicians and filmmakers.
You are fairly safe to be working on the popular ones there. So rather, I'm going to jump back to what you started and what inspired you. But now you are a digital artist, and you've worked on most of the Avengers films. Is that right? What's your movie life at the moment?
At the moment,
the last few years, should I say?
The last few years, I worked mostly on all of the Avengers films. So I worked on like Black Panther, and I worked on the Civil War, and all of those. And my main character that I kept coming back around to was War Machine. So I would just continually update and rebuild the War Machine character. And then a lot of vehicles and things like that. So it was really fun. At the same time they were making the Star Wars movies, and so I was sort of keen, kind of keeping my eye on those crews and what was going on over there. But having worked on so many Star Wars films, I was like, well, you know, the Marvel films are very beloved. And so I think that's okay to work on these films. So, but it was odd, you know, having worked on all these Star Wars movies and then switching over to Marvel films and watching the Star Wars movies getting made. So yeah, but it was a lot of fun. I had a good time on all the Marvel movies.
They are an exceptional bunch, and we can see Hulkbuster just there in the background, I guess.
Yeah,
peeking over your shoulder.
That was the big one that I worked on pretty much exclusively. I built the CG model. There was a model built by Legacy Effects, a practical model that was on the set, and we had lots of photographs of that. It was sort of like a simplified version. It was very chromy, very reflective, and then the fully realized one was the one that I worked on, which is a bit more complicated and more developed looking. But yeah. And I also worked on the Veronica rocket that's kind of flying around in the battle sequence where he's fighting the Hulk, and it's like distributing bits and pieces of like his new armor and new weapons that he needs throughout the fight. There were actually, the fight went on for so long, I didn't really understand how long that fight was going to go on for when I started on it, but there was something like over 40 damaged versions of him, as each time the Hulk hit him and there was a big dent or a scrape, or he flies through a wall or something, that's another version of the model that had to be, you know, built and painted and everything. So. And
did you completely own the Hulkbuster? So design, look, paint, and all its iterations.
I can't claim the design.
Well, not the design, right?
Yeah, that came from the Marvel artists. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like sitting there and like making all of the parts in in Maya, that would be me pretty much exclusively, and then all the damage and everything as well. So, no, it's not very often you get that kind of that. Usually it's a team effort, but it's not very often you get that kind of opportunity, you know. So it was pretty satisfying.
And you've been working digitally since 97-ish, 98?
Yeah, I transitioned from the Industrial Light and Magic model shop right when Jurassic Park: The Lost World came out. So I worked on that one. So
right.
I actually trained myself in computer graphics. I sort of saw that things were headed that direction. So I wanted to be able to make that transition, and grabbed some manuals that were sitting on a shelf and stayed late after work. And I sort of let it be known to the heads of the CG department that I was staying late and I was trying to learn this stuff, and they didn't care. Right. They were like, okay, whatever you want to do, it's fine. We'll give you a little bit of memory. You can save some of your stuff on there, you know. And so I had these old kind of battle-worn computers that they had like discarded, and these manuals, and I had a VCR with a tape to show me how to, like, you know, make a cube and stuff like that. So I would spend the nights, you know, working on that, and then I'd send out emails all the time saying, hey, I finished the cube, so just want to let you know I'm moving on, I'm not giving up. And eventually I think they just gave me a job to shut me up. They're like, all right, you know, come on board, and we'll show you how to, you know, make some stuff. And I trained like heck to make dinosaurs, because I figured I was going to get a chance to work on Lost World, and what they put me on was vehicles. So I was like, what? I don't know how to do that. I just like dinosaurs and goopy monsters and stuff. So it was a challenge for sure. But that mobile lab that gets pulled over the side of the cliff, that gets kind of like goes down the cliff and everyone's hanging inside, that's the thing I made.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
And is it, I guess, you know, it's much difference because you've worked both practical and you've worked digital. So, I mean, one of the questions that came up is, when you do multiple versions of the same thing, how difficult is it to keep continuity in digital? And but basically, it's virtually the same as doing practical effects, is it?
Yeah, and we kind of have, usually the live action takes place before we start working on things. So we typically have lots of reference photographs. If it's something that, you know, is drugged through the mud, or if it's been dressed with something on set that gives it a unique look, we'll have lots of good photographs of that kind of thing. And a few times I've been able to go down and take photographs myself, which is always the best. On like the Lost World, I got to go to the Universal lot and stand there while Spielberg was shooting in the background, and like secretly take photographs of everything I could get my lens on. And on AI, artificial intelligence, I got to do the same thing and go down and take pictures of the amphibicopter and some of the sets and things. So, but yeah, very, very typically we'll build 2 reference photographs, and then we'll take that into dailies, and everyone will, you know, kind of put you in a sweat box, and they'll nitpick over the smallest details. So they'll have a wipe. They'll be wiping back like real Memorex, and to like see if they can see any changes, any differences. So they can be pretty nitty gritty on that kind of stuff. The thing that always kind of made me a little bit crazy is digital doubles, when they want to do, you know, digital effects where they show someone going, like, you know, in a car, you know, crashing or something, and they'd zoom in and like want to get like every nose hair just right. And so you do it, you know, and everybody's happy. And then you see the film and it's a car going over a cliff on fire and exploding, and like, where was my digital double in all of that? It was there. It was a streak.
Well, it's immense. I mean, so like in Rogue One, where they brought Peter Cushing back, the level of quality that they can do now on reproducing individuals and peoples and faces, I guess, and true, I think, it's kind of true gravity around individuals, because some of the early ones did noticeably be CGI when they were bouncing around, and they seem to have, technology seems to have come along quite a way on it.
The standard response to that is that a lot of it is not so much obeying the laws of physics, but trying to get the character through the scene as fast as the director wants you to get him through the scene. Right. So they just want fast action. They don't really care how heavy anything is. They just want to go and like entertain the hell out of the audience. So a lot of times the animators are just like throwing their hands in the air, like, well, you know, that's not what a real thing would do, but that's what we're going to do because that's what they want. So, you know, elephants don't bounce like that, but, you know, they'll just do it.
Immense. Okay, right. Anyway, so let's And I think I'm really interested also in the transition from practical to digital. So let's zoom right back to the beginning. How did young Howie Weed start off and go, I want to work in movies?
Well, I sort of knew I wanted to work in movies when it was before like junior high. I
Oh, really?
thought
Okay.
it was the one thing that, there was a small rep house, second, kind of second run movie house near where I lived. And I'd go there almost every weekend and they'd have double features. So I saw all the big classic movies on the big screen, and that was really cool. And the stuff that really excited me was like the Ray Harryhausen films.
Yeah.
You'd go see Jason and the Argonauts on the big screen, and then you'd go I remember one time I went to go see 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I knew had spaceships in it or something, because I was like 10, and then it had Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger as the other one, and that's the one I knew I really wanted to see. So I'd sit through this whatever 2001 was to see the cool stop motion monster one, and 2001 I was too young for 2001. I didn't understand anything of what was going on, but I was kind of gobsmacked about how visually cool it was. And then of course Sinbad put the hooks in me pretty hard. And I knew I wanted to do something in the film industry, but I sort of imagined maybe I'd be like a great like writer or director or something, because back in the day there wasn't a whole lot of coverage on visual effects or what people did in the background. Like you always saw pictures of cameras on the set and the director, and that's kind of movie making, right? So I went to film school, and at San Francisco State University, this was in college, finally. I'd been making Super 8 movies and showing them to my poor family members up to that point. And I made little science fiction films with spaceships and things made of cardboard and talcum powder for explosions and stuff like that. Which I all thought was like fantastic. Like it was just the revelation of being able to do anything on film. Like, look, it's just talcum powder, but it looks kind of like an explosion, like I see in the movies. And eventually, I was in downtown San Francisco. There was a flyer on a telephone pole with like pull off telephone numbers, and it was like, "Hey, do you want to help us make a movie? It's a horror film called Dracula's Disciple." And I pulled off the phone number and called. And it was a group of people that had been making this horror film for a couple of years. And you went to their meetings, and they would pass a hat around, and you put money in the hat, and it let them buy film stock and rent some place to shoot. And in exchange for doing that, they gave you kind of like classes. They had professional people on the team, and you would go to their little warehouse, and they would show you how to rig lights, or they would show you how to load a film camera and how to take the film out of the camera in a camera bag. And then you would kind of graduate to be crewing the film. So you're paying, you're learning, you're actually on the shoot. It's like that's how film school should be, in my opinion. You're making a, welcome to making a movie. You will now be part of this process. And it was really neat. And I made all my professional contacts while I was there. One of my good friends, Brent Baker, who's in the business down in LA, he had some connections to this puppet effects company called Chris Wallace Incorporated up in Marin, and they were working on this tiny little puppet film called Gremlins, and which no one had heard of. And so he was able to get a job there. And then later, like right at the tail end of Gremlins, they needed more people. And so he was able to help me get a job there just for the summer, making extra Gremlins for the big theater scene where they're all singing hi-ho. So they just needed lots and lots of puppets. So we were basically making shopping carts full of puppets and like rolling them down the street back and forth between different shops to have them put together. And so that was sort of my professional like insertion into the industry. And I seriously thought once Gremlins was over, I'd probably go back to school, because it was just a one show kind of a thing. But then something else would come up, and something else would come up, and I just never ended up going back.
Could you'd be how old at Gremlins?
19.
19, yeah. Hey, did you know we share the same birthday?
Oh, really?
23rd of December. Yeah.
Aren't we lucky? We can combine our presents and get really cool stuff.
I know. That's the same lie that I was sold by my parents, I think. Look, rather than having two presents, you can now have one. Fantastic. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
was spoiled. I was spoiled. So no complaints from me.
right. So yeah, so Gremlins, and what was your what? So it was mainly the sort of Ray Harryhausen's that were the inspirations, and and I guess a lot of it was the science fiction and the fantasy type genre.
Yeah, I was always interested in creature films that had a cool monster in them. I was never all that much into the slasher horror genre, which was real big in the 80s. You know, where you were doing the body count thing with Freddy or Jason, and I was just like, I don't know. I mean, there was lots of work in that area, making different kinds of death scenarios and stuff like that. But I always pushed if I could work on something that was more of an alien or a monster or something like that. That was more fantasy oriented. That was my thing. The closest thing I came to like a real horror film was Cronenberg's The Fly. And when I worked on that, there was a scene where I had to be under the set wearing a raincoat, and the raincoat was for all the blood that was going to come through the floor from the set above. And I remember we were puppeteering. It was a baboon. The baboon gets clobbered. Oh, you're seeing pictures from Naked Lunch there. That's from another also Cronenberg film. But at one point the baboon gets killed by Jeff Goldblum and with like a lead pipe. And so he starts above our heads. We're under the set. Above our heads, he's beating this thing, and the cameras are rolling, and the director's screaming, "More blood!" And so we have pressure, pots underneath, and we're like just really shooting like geysers of blood out of this thing, and it's flying everywhere. But it's coming through the floorboards, and it's like a shower of blood raining on us with our bright yellow raincoats and all this red blood over it, and it's just going and going, and the director's screaming, "More blood!" And I was just thinking, at one point I actually yelled, "He's dead already! He's dead!" and I heard him say, "All right, cut." But that's when I sort of looked at the guy opposite me, and we were both just like covered in blood, and I thought, I don't know about this movie, man. I don't know. Yeah. This is pretty extreme. And then it came out and it got all kinds of great reviews and everything. And I was all about it. I'm like, yep, that's me. I worked on The Fly. But it was fun. Yeah. It was lots of makeup stuff. That was sort of like my makeup part of my career, where I got to work with a really talented makeup effects artist named Stefan Dupuis. And he's been in the business a real long time. And he showed me a lot of his techniques. So I was able to assist on the small stuff on set, like help put the bodysuit on and blend all the hands and legs and things together, and just be there, on set, kind of touching things up and stuff like that. That was great fun. It was different than just puppets, Yeah. It was different than just doing puppets, which, doesn't complain if you poke it with scissors. Yeah, that's Stefan on the right. I'm in the middle, and that's Chris Wallace on the left, who owned the shop and was the head of the visual effects, or rather the special makeup effects department. And that's Jeff Goldblum in there, trying to. What a great trooper he was, head to toe with that suit, and he was sweating it up in there. I'm telling you, we take the suit off, it would just be completely soaked with his sweat. And he never complained once. Actually, I would ask, how are you doing? What do you need? And he'd say, well, how are you doing? What do you guys need? Are you okay? And I couldn't believe that he was, he was so selfless. He was also one of these guys. He had the entire script memorized, every single person's part memorized in the film. Yeah, he could recite the entire film from beginning to end.
Oh my God! So is as intense in real life as he appears on film. Then he's quite very very clever.
He's super smart. He's super smart. Yeah. And really fun to be around. He's very jokey and fun. And even when he's looking like the pustule suit, like that's what we called it, the pustule suit.
Yeah.
I think we had 3 of those, and we'd swap them out as they would, be needing touch-ups, because he did a lot of physical stuff in that. So he kept tearing and ripping up and shredding the suit as he would do all these athletic things in it. So we had to have 3 that were revolving and to kind of keep it going. There was a point where we would hang them up in our little trailer at night. This was in Toronto, so it was freezing outside. It was -0 outside. So we would have this little trailer outside the main buildings, and we would hang them on clothes hangers inside this little trailer, his pustule suits, and we would close it up and turn up the heat like a little drying, oven, overnight, and we'd come back and we'd draw straws to see who would go in first because the smell was just so overwhelming. So yeah, that's the glamorous world of filmmaking.
Yeah. How long was he in makeup for every day? I mean, that's the question.
Oh yeah, it got pretty quick. I think it was about a couple of hours, and he would put on the suit about midway through the process, but the head and the face were kind of constantly going, and then the suit would come on about halfway, and then his hands and feet at the very, very end. So he could still like lift a glass with a straw in it to his teeth or whatever he needed to do.
And a couple other from that era that I saw that you worked on the Ewok Adventures. Is that something that you're proud of?
That's one of my favorite. I know people make fun of it and everything. At the time, it was a job. Like there was really nothing going on in the area. I think what did we finish? We'd finished Romancing the Stone, and I can't remember what else. But things were really like, there's going to be a while before there was anything else. And I got a call from John Berg, who, if you know John, he was actually the Pillsbury Doughboy in those old Pillsbury Doughboy ads. He was the finger that that poked the little doughboy, and he was also the Jolly Green Giant. So that was him in tights from the waist down, going ho 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 Green Giant. So but most famously, he's one of the animators from The Empire Strikes Back on the big AT-AT Walker sequence. So you always see that famous picture of like a hatch door open, and he's like sticking his head up into the frozen tundra and like doing an adjustment, an animation adjustment. So that's him. Super, super nice guy. He called me up, and he had been awarded Ewok's Caravan of Courage, and he wanted to know if I was available to help out. And I said, yes, I'm available. So it was him and another fantastic visual effects guy, Phil Tippett. And it was the two of them, and I was part of their team, and so was another guy named Jonathan Horton, and we were like the support team, and they were like the grand visual effects experts to kind of guiding us through this whole process. But we made a big suit for John, so he was this sort of giant bear-like creature, and in the film, and then we made this dog that's like terrorizes the Ewoks at one point. It's like a little animatronic puppet that was a hand puppet with like snarls and things. And I think, and we made little tiny Ewoks that were like this. Where's my hands? This big, and they were on sticks. They were like Ewoks on sticks, so they really didn't have any feet. It was just a stick there, and we made like 6 of them, and we made them so that their hands were out in front of themselves, and they were all holding spears. And they wanted a shot where the Ewoks had won the day, and they were celebrating. So they're jumping up and down, and their spears are going up and down. So it's sort of like, yay, that kind of a thing. And so we made these tiny little puppets and on sticks, and then the spears were on sticks. And we all jumped into Phil Tippett's car at one point, and with the puppets, and he said, "Oh, what are we doing?" And he said, "We're going to go get those shots right now." And we were like, "Okay, so who's going to puppeteer? You guys are going to puppeteer." Oh, okay. So we drove out to Skywalker. I mean, all he had to do was say, "Who is it?" "Phil Tippett." "Let him in." And so they let him in. We're driving down this road towards the Skywalker Ranch, the big famous ranch house there. And then we stopped on the road about halfway. Like no one stops there. There's nowhere to pull over. It's just a place stop. And we jumped out, and he said, hurry, quick, run up the side of that hill with the puppets. And so we went, okay. And it's all these giant redwoods around us, just like Endor. And the camera crew got out, and they got real low, looking up at the sky, at the trees and everything, and the big redwoods. And they said, okay, hold up the Ewok puppets. And we did. They said, now a little bit lower, a little bit higher. All right, now shake them like they're celebrating. And we're like doing this yay thing, they're like thing like that. And he said, okay, we got it. And we like, get back in the car. And we all ran back down and jumped in the car. And that was our like guerrilla filmmaking moment where we got those shots. It was really cool. It was a fun show.
Oh yeah, Ewok Adventures, and I've got to get Enemy Mine, another one of my favorites. Right,
yeah. There was like 2 versions of Enemy Mine. There was the one that we started on was a Richard Longcrane version, and what had happened is Star Wars had come out, and 20th Century Fox was like, we need like another Star Wars, but one that we own exclusively. So I think it was a Rupert Murdoch moment where he decided, yeah, that's what we need. So let's take this property, Enemy Mine, and let's make that Star Wars for us, just for us. We'll own the whole thing. And we started working on the effects, which was a lot of alien suits and alien heads, and Lou Gossett came in and we did a live casting with him. This is back at Chris Walas Incorporated again. And it was really fun because it was full bodysuits, which not a lot of that had happened up to that point. You had like Altered States and American Werewolf and some Dick Smith stuff, but that was about it. And there wasn't a lot of places that had done head to toe creature type stuff. So we were kind of like children wading into this like battlefield of like, oh my God, I hope we can pull this off. And what happened is about halfway through, the studio looked at the film that they had so far and they decided, this is not Star Wars. This is some kind of heady cerebral science fiction thing with like thinking involved. And so they said, no. We just want like this, rip-roaring Western like Star Wars. So they pulled the plug on what we were working on. Everything was scrapped ultimately, and we started over. So the film was about 13 months of us working on this thing. And then it was Wolfgang Peterson, I believe, was the final director. And we got like the B version, which was more colorful, less ponderous about life and the meaning of it, and more about survival, like a survival story. And yeah, it was good fun. And Lou was really cool to work with. He was a real professional, and he was delivering these amazing performances under 3 inches of makeup, which I thought was his whole, like, he came up with that whole language, his kind of language, Davich, and all that stuff. That was pretty neat, So yeah, it was a good one, and a nice long one with lots of different creature effects in it. So it was still early on,
It certainly wasn't Star Wars.
If it hits you at the right age, I think. I haven't watched it in like 15 years, so I don't even have like a current opinion on.
I was throwing your filmography across the bottom and see if it could if it last the entire interview.
But yeah, that was a neat one. It was like, we were really excited. Just the fact that we had a character that was going to be a main character sharing screen with a human character for the whole film that had to hold up for the entire film was like really like awesome. For a challenge for us as artists.
I'm walking in the footsteps of Rick Baker and Dick Smith, then full bodysuits.
All we heard were horror stories about what didn't work on those movies, and don't do this and don't do that because that didn't work for them either. We're like, what? Okay, we'll try to think of some else to do it. We had a lot of problems with like foam shrinking and things like that. So you'd start with a sculpture that went all the way down the arm to the wrist, and then you'd cast the piece in foam, and it would shrink, and it would only be up midway through his arm. So, even if you stretched it as far as you could stretch it, it was like, nope, we're having the same problems they had. And so it was a lot of like, making patch repair, extensions for things and blending things together. And there was also kits that we sent on set that would be for other DRAC actors so that they could assemble suits for them and like adapt them to however long their limbs were and, things like that.
And then, so we'll move on. Ghostbusters 2 was the next one I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, I started at the ILM model shop on Inner Space, and I was working on the interior of the body stuff there. Yeah. The only reason I got a job there at the time was because Howard the Duck had just wrapped. And the Howard the Duck was like a year and a half of people's lives, and everyone was so exhausted. They either went back to LA, they quit the industry forever, or they were on vacation. So I walked into an empty shop when they were looking for somebody to work on this movie. And they sort of hired me on the spot. They went like, oh, you've done creature stuff? You're in. We need you. So you can start tomorrow. We're behind. And so that was really awesome. Really great group of people. I have like super fond memories of that whole time. I got to work with like Lauren Peterson and Charlie Bailey, some of the guys that tell all the original Star Wars stories. So it was pretty cool.
And you were acting in that one as well.
For Ghostbusters 2, I did. Yeah. There was this point where they decided they wanted some more footage of Stance after he touches the painting. To be, and they decided they wanted to actually see him as a creature. I think this was like a 11th hour decision, and so they couldn't get the actor who was on another show already, and they said, well, you sort of look like him, Howie. We could just do you. And I was like, okay, all right, yeah, I'll do it. And the effects guys had a great time because they didn't have to worry about an actor being temperamental or worry about how uncomfortable he is. It was just Howie. So they kind of just did these life castings of me. And one of the things I needed to do was go to LA and get my eyeballs cast. So like taking molds of my eyes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was working in the model shop and they said, hey, Howie, there's a cab outside. You need to go to LA. So just get in the cab. Here's your ticket. Go to LA and they're going to take life castings of your eyes. And I was like, okay, I'm sure you guys know what you're doing. That's fine. So I got to the dentist's office in LA, rented a car and everything. Got there and this Dr. Greenspoon or Span, I can't recall. Spoon, but he was sort of famous in the LA visual or makeup effects industry, and he stretched my eyelids over like a clear plastic cup, so kind of Clockwork Orange style, and they had a little tube coming out of the bottom of the cup, and he mixed up alginate, which is usually put on the outside of your, like to take a dental impression or to like take mold of your skin or something.
Oh, he just used alginate to cast your eyeballs. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then he put that in a syringe and just injected it. And he kept saying, look directly at me, look directly at me. And this guy normally takes care of little tiny kids. That's like his normal clients. So when it's adults, he doesn't have any patience. I would like glance over. He said, I thought I told you to look straight ahead. And I'd be, oh, I'm sorry. And so I remember he injected the stuff in the eye and everything just went black. And he waited about a minute and he said, okay, I'm going to wiggle it out. And he had to it had gone back to like my optic nerve. And he had to like wiggle this thing until it kind of popped out.
Nice.
So yeah. And it was kind of fascinating. I was like staring at this thing that he made. It made your eye water like crazy. Like that eye is done for the day, But normally he leaves one good eye so you can still see everything, but they had to do both in the same day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I had sunglasses with tissues stuffed underneath because my eyes wouldn't stop watering.
I thought it used to taste like mint, didn't it, alginate? From what I remember.
It's pretty fast.
They didn't use the minty one, did they?
I don't think so. I didn't smell anything, so probably just the neutral, whatever the neutral is. But when he cast the eyeballs in, like polystone, so I could see what they look like before I left, and it's really weird. It looks like a ball of string, like all that texture. If you take the wetness off the surface of your eye, it's this like really fibrous ball of string or like thread, Oh,
okay.
So
not smooth and clean then.
Yeah, and the veins are dimensional. You can see the veins sitting on the surface. Yeah. So, and that's what he used to make the contact lenses for the character. And they were glass. They didn't have the technology to do the soft plastic ones back then. And so
is that the sculpt there of the character?
I'm sorry?
Is that the sculpt, this one?
Yeah, that's so right there you're seeing like midway through the prosthetics being applied.
Okay, that's you underneath all of that, is it?
Yep, that's me. And Mike Smithson was the kind of co-designer and the sculptor and applications person on that one.
So you didn't work on the character, you didn't sculpt and act, you were just the...
I helped with some design, but I wasn't the final like a prosthetics guy. I was the victim this time. It was interesting that you can see the eye there is red. It's black with red. So it's covering, the glass lens is covering my entire eye, and the makeup covers my ears. So I was basically blind, and I could see a pinhole of light, and I couldn't hear very much because I had latex over my ears. And then they put teeth in and had me swish grape Kool-Aid in my mouth to make my mouth black. So, and then they stood me up on a stage, like a really thin stage with no handrail or anything, and hoped I didn't fall over. And then for the actual filming of this, they they had dialogue recorded and they played it back at double speed and shot high speed. So, you know, what I heard was, if you go to the Carpathian, and they'd say, okay, Howie, you got that? Can you do it? And I'm like, can you play that? Let's put on a loop. Just keep playing it until we have to shoot. And so I kept trying to do it over and over and over again.
Well, you've always been practicing, that was
it was like, I'm like, oh my God, okay, all right, I think I can get this. And then I looked down and I noticed there was a tent in front of me with a tube sticking out, pointing at my face. And I asked what that was. They said, oh, right. There's going to be a column of slime shot at your face while you're doing the lines. So, and there was a guy in there, and he had this like, you know, handle that he could twist, and it would turn on this, like, I swear, man, like a silver dollar's worth of thick of slime shooting at high velocity right at my face. So when they call action, they'd start the recording that, and I'm trying to do it, and then the column of slime would shoot and hit my face, and it would get in my mouth. So my mouth was full of slime while I'm trying to do this thing. And we probably shot it a dozen times. Dennis Murin, visual effects supervisor, he was running around the stage with a flashlight. So he would tell me, look wherever the flashlight is. And so he'd run back and forth behind the camera, and I could see this dot of light moving. So I could kind of like look around, like getting slapped with slime. So, and then my favorite part.
They
didn't have to do it.
What was going to happen? He went, no, there's no way I'm doing that. Howie over there, he's quite gullible.
It was funny. In the end, my favorite part was that my head explodes like the Death Star. It's like the shower of sparks. It just sort of, it gets small and then it goes. And I was like, I think that's the same explosion of like the Death Star exploding. I think it's pretty much a shower of sparks. So
amazing jobs.
Thanks. From my point of view, it was just whatever you say, I'll do it. Fine. It's fine by me. You know, I don't know what's going on out there.
Oh, where next? After that, Naked Lunch.
Oh, right. Yeah. That was back at Chris Walas Inc. I would go back and forth sometimes between Industrial Light Magic and Chris Walas Inc. And this was another Cronenberg film, and it's based on a book called Naked Lunch by William Burroughs. It's a very tough read. It's like a stream of consciousness, surreal stream of consciousness kind of thing. You have to be like almost like a poet on acid to really appreciate it while you're reading it. And the movie comes across almost the same. So anybody out there who's seen it, you're welcome, or I'm sorry, whichever one works for you. It's a tough watch as well. But they had these creatures called the mugwumps in them, which is what you're seeing, and they're at a bar at one scene, and so I was a puppeteer for a scene where it's smoking and talking to Peter Weller, RoboCop. It's talking to RoboCop.
Okay, yeah.
In this bar scene, so. Yeah, it was a really cool experience just because I think the creatures were really interesting, and they were designed and sculpted by Stefan Dupuis, and it was a great team, and you know, just lots of fun doing weird surreal stuff.
And you worked with Cronenberg.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's fun to hang out with on the set between shots and stuff. You could ask him anything, he'll tell you the verbatim what's really happened. Like you read press about him, like he's this dark soul who collects spiders and you know, stuff like that. And I'd go, so I just read this article about you that says you collect spiders, and you go, they say stuff like that. He goes, I had a butterfly collection as a child, but of course that doesn't sound very interesting, so they change it around.
I'll continue down my DVD list. The Flintstones. You worked on the Flintstones.
Right. Yeah, there was a shots of bedrock where you get to see like these master reveal moments. And I worked on the bottom picture there. That says "Welcome to Bedrock." That was something that I got to build, and then work on the set with a great guy named Tony Summers. And what we did, we were just by ourselves. It was just two of us putting that entire landscape together. And what we would do is we set up a 35mm camera with a piece of film in the aperture. So when you look through the camera, you could kind of see outlines of where all the major structures were. You'd see like just a black and white outline, and we'd have these like tables, and someone would look through the camera, like Tony would look through the camera, and then I'd pick up a rock and I'd say here, And he'd go, no, no, look to the left, the other left. Okay, go lower. Okay, put it right there. And that lines up with like the big rock. And then we just went through that for days until we had the whole thing sort of mapped out.
I enjoyed it.
It was fun.
It was a good fun movie.
Man, so campy.
Very, very, very. Oh, and then Men in Black.
Right. Yeah. Men in Black happened. It's right on top of when the special edition stuff started happening for the Star Wars films. But yeah, that came up, and there was a creature or a human called Mr. Gentle, who his face opens in the film, and there's an alien inside. So Rick Baker had designed the alien inside, and his crew had built a full-size puppet alien. But they don't do hard surface kind of, mechanical things. So they sent that part to the Island Model Shop, and I became the supervisor on that show. And I had a really terrific crew, Mark Siegel and Carol Bauman, and they built a lot of the individual components, and then we put them all together. So there's this life-size version that's the same size as a human, and that could be on set. And it had a screen a face that would open mechanically, and little monitors inside that John Fordham had made that actually worked. And then the creature inside could move its head and some basic things, but whenever it had to speak, they cut to a much bigger version of this whole thing where there was an alien that was like almost the size of a human in there. So yeah, it was a really fun episode. I remember they sent us the actual actors casting, Rick Baker's crew did, and it was all painted with hair and everything. And it was like a human corpse kind of from the waist up. And so we put it on a table, so we had that out while we were working. And I swear, every morning I'd walk into this empty shop early in the morning, and I'd just sort of be standing there with my coffee, and I'd feel like some presence, and I'd jump, and it was like, damn it, it's that stupid Mr. Gentle thing again. And it must have scared me like 3 or 4 times, just like, shit, I'm gonna have to move that thing or put a bag over it or something. But
did you work with Rick Baker? Have you done anything with him?
Yeah, I worked at Cinovation once on Michael Jackson's Captain EO project. Okay. If you've ever seen that, it was a Disneyland 3D film that was about 20 minutes long. And I got to work on this little fluffy character that sits on Michael Jackson's shoulder that's all these primary colors, red and yellow and things. And that was really cool because I really wanted to work at Rick's shop at some point, and that was kind of wish fulfillment there. And met lots of really cool people. It was a really great show. I also worked on Rat Boy, which was sort of happening about the same time. It's a Sandra Lockhart film. Yeah, it was cool. We actually got the cinematographer to come and check out all our puppets. And when he showed up, I found out it was going to be Vittorio Storaro, who shot Apocalypse Now. And so I'm a huge fan. So I brought in my Apocalypse Now poster. It was all folded with, messed up looking. And he was getting the tour, and he came by my desk, and I said, excuse me, you're Vittorio Storaro, who's the cinematographer on Apocalypse Now. And he kind of lit up like, someone knows who I am in this place. And I was like, would you mind signing? And he just took it from me, and he gave me this great signature. It was a really cool moment for me anyway, just meeting him. But at the time, the movie was supposed to have this dual purpose. It was supposed to be about color theory, and like each of the creatures was going to be a primary color. And you were going to kind of like find out what happens when you mess with primary colors and stuff. But I think they just got too much information in one film, too many things to explain. So that whole idea was ultimately dropped. And fine by me. I didn't affect us at all. But anyway, that's what. If anyone ever wonders, like, why is everything such prime colors? That's why.
There was a story that was dropped.
There was a color side story, yeah.
And then, we've talked to you for hours. We're not going to do Star Wars. Well, we need to jump straight into that. How did your involvement in the special editions come around? That's going to be the dream job, hasn't it?
Yeah, what was going on is they were starting to restore the original films. So they were getting rid of grain. They were redoing the wipes of the original Star Wars, and as part of that process, George got a chance to insert some stuff that didn't go right the first time they shot things. It's debatable when you say didn't go right. It was going to go perfect, but
Yeah,
I'm kind of one of those people. You just accept it. It's part of your childhood. It's ingrained in every little nuance of those movies. But who am I to argue? If they want to hire me to put some stuff in those films, I'm more than happy. And one of the things that they wanted to replace was the werewolf with the glowing eyes from the original Star Wars. That's just like brief shot of him like going with a cup, and that was a Rick Baker creature as well. And so I actually felt a little remorse. I'm like, I don't want to replace Rick Baker's work. That's not what I'm here for.
Get out, Rick.
Yeah, exactly. I'll send a remorse card. But they had this design, the Ketwall, which was like this sort of elephant creature. And I think they had ideas of this thing appearing in the new films that were coming up. That's what it was designed for. And so then they could start kind of doing crossover between the original, like seeing similar things in all the films. So I was in the Island Model Shop, and I got charged with doing the sculpture, doing the mold work, and then doing the casting and painting. So the whole thing I got to do. If you reached up inside there, it's just hollow. And you could move the face around with your hand, but it also had these eyeballs with like finger cups in the back, so I could move the eyes, like, around. They would just slide around in there. And it was one brief shot where, it just, there it is, in place of the werewolf with the glowing eyes. So we were in the midst of shooting that. Our director on stage was John Knoll. Who if you don't know, he invented Photoshop. So he's him and his brother. So mad props, right? So he was the director, and he said, he looked at the back of the puppet and he said, I think that could be another creature if you looked at it just the right way. Can you make the eyes look backwards? And I could, because they were just loose in there, and I made him look the other way. And he said, turn the puppet around. We've got those other shots. Let's make another puppet out of this. So, all right. And we got a turban from the costume department and wrapped it around the backside, so it kind of covered up the nose and the trunk and the tusks. And that became the meatless creature. And we had it smoking in the shot. So that's just the backside of the same monster.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You see the turban's covering up the tusks and the trunk and all that other stuff back there. But I mean, literally, this just happened. I never thought about the backside of the head. I didn't do much sculpturally back there. It wasn't the idea to do that. If it had, I might have spent a little more time. But that's what that is. And we kind of threw a bunch of model kit parts together and created a pipe. We had someone below set actually blowing smoke through the pipe so that you could see smoke like trailing up. And then the name Ketwall, there was no name for it. I kept asking if there was a name, and they kept saying not that we know of. And so came time, I had to get the mold I had made had to get shipped to the UK. And so I had to have some kind of name. I tried one more time and they didn't know. So it was up to me to call it something. So I got the biggest marker I could find, like one of those Sharpie markers that has like an inch tall head, and all over the model I wrote Ketwall, which backwards is low tech, which I thought, because CG was up and coming. So I thought that's clever. I actually asked Don Bees, I said, who was one of the model shop guys. He's an R2 guy too. And I said, hey Don, I called him this thing, the Ketwall. Can you figure out how I did that? And he took like 2 seconds. He went low tech backwards. Then he turned to walk. Damn it. So I just sent it. I didn't know if they would adopt that name or what would, be called something else at some point. But when the toy came out, after episode 1 came out, I picked up the toy and the blister pack and it said Ketwall on it. So I feel like George named every single creature, but he didn't name that one. Or maybe he did because he approved it. So someone had to, he probably said, yeah, fine, whatever. But anyway, I thought that was kind of a win.
Oh, no, fantastic. We were talking to some of the R2 builders, the guys that are in various, supplying some of the R2s from the Builders Club in the movies. And they pretty much name theirs as well. So I think everybody leaves a little piece of history, and then suddenly it becomes a toy, and you think,
yeah, that's kind of the thing when you work on these movies. It's like, is the thing that I worked on going to be a toy? And then,
With a,
That's the ultimate
stand in front of a 2-foot Hulk buster. You can say that now with,
right.
with confidence.
And after that, after Men in Black, word came down from the ranch that George wanted to insert some new shots of the Wampa creature, ice creature, into the movie, that he just didn't have all the shots that he wanted to get with the creature that they had built at the time. And the way he cut it was sort of how he was forced to cut it. And we all had a big meeting, and George came in at the last minute, and everyone got real quiet. And we started pitching ideas like big CG, extravaganza, guy in a suit, puppets, what could we think of? And all George would say is, I just want to get a scare. I just want that moment where you see it and you're like, holy crap, it's this hulking thing. So I suggested, I had made this little maquette showing like a human being inside a suit, and I suggested making the set smaller, like scaling down the set, and then building the creature not on stilts or anything like they had done for the original Empire, but like just a guy in a suit, and playing with scale from the set point of view. And so he thought about it for a second, and he said, yeah, that sounds good. Let's just go with just a guy in a suit. And so all the CG guys were like, oh. And I was like, yes, do a guy in a suit. And so we were prepping. We were building the head and sculpting parts of him and things, but we hadn't cast an actor yet. And so I went up to Dennis Murin in the hallway, and I said, hey, Dennis, we're getting pretty close to it's time to cast someone who's going to be in this suit. So I guess we're going to have to go through SAG. I guess we're going to have somebody who we fly up from LA. We put in a hotel, and we have to be real careful around, and that process. And I said, or I could do it. So he gave me this look like, and finally he went like, all right, you can do it. I was like, yes, I get to do it. So that made things really convenient, because anytime we needed a fitting, I was there, I was working on it. I could just put the whole suit on, and we could keep testing until we got to the final result. Annie Polland was one of the original Star Wars costumers, and she was part of the team that built it up from a stocking bodysuit all the way up to the final design. One of the fun things about the fur, working with the fur, is that it comes as it looks like a big fuzzball when you get that fur. It's just sticking straight out. It's like it looks like a toy, and you really have to work on it. You have to get a lot of gel and product and things in there to clump it up and make it lay down and sculpt it a little bit. And one of the final things we did is we melted a lot of wax, like white, clear paraffin wax, in a pot. And then we would take a brush and get a bunch of it on a brush, and we would just jam it into the fur and let it cool down. And once it cooled down, we'd crush it with our hands, and it would look like frozen ice crystals hanging in the fur. And I thought it just looked so good. You wanted to do it everywhere. It's like, yeah. And also we were looking at reference of like polar bears, when they get a sea lion, how there's just this like yellow red going all the way down the front of them. They get this like stained fur until they take a bath. And so we thought that would be cool, but we didn't know what George thought of gore. So we kind of kept it, we were pretty subtle, but we had some coming off his chin and going down his neck. And when we got there on the set, we found out that George loves gore. So he just said, more. We couldn't put enough, like, grizzle and red and, stuff coming off of his chest. And he'd go, yeah, he was really getting into it. And then the same thing with that bone. There's a shot where I take a bite out of the bone, and there's all this like bleh kind of coming out. And that was a bucket and a big brush that was being jammed into my mouth with all of this goop. And they literally keep doing it until they rolled camera. Then they'd pull it out of the way, and I'd take the drumstick away from my mouth. It'd all come like flowing out.
Nice. What was it? What was the hardest part about the Wampa, or being in the Wampa suit?
It was hot. It was the middle of summer. It was already over 100 degrees outside. Yeah, and in order for everything to stay in focus in the shot, the foreground, like stalactites, and the background, they had to pump a lot of light in there so they could iris down and get like no blurriness on the foreground or background. So there were they have these lights called the walls of fire, and they would roll these things. They were like 9 huge lights all like chained together, and they would roll them into the set and turn them all on top of the 100-degree weather. So inside, it was, inside the suit, it was very, very, very toasty. But they had built into it a air system. So at my ankle, they could plug a pressure hose in, and the whole suit would kind of like inflate, like boom, like a balloon. And I would feel this cold air like going all through my suit, and it would bring my body temperature down to like normal. It wouldn't get cold. It just felt like, oh, like opening a window and a cool breeze was coming in. And then they'd say, okay, we have to get off the set. They're ready to, start rehearsing. Yeah. And the air would turn off. Instantly, everything got super hot again. And then we'd start. That's a Mark Siegel on the right. He kept me alive. He kept me alive by putting air hoses in my mouth. And then Don B's on the left. He looks like he's snapping the neck down. There's this snap system to keep the fur together all the way around the edges. Yeah,
it does look it looks a fair old costume to wear, that I've got to say.
Yeah, it was really neat though. I had always wanted to maybe do a suit performance, and I knew from reputation that these things can be torture on whoever wears them. Mm. So when this came up, I thought, well, if ever there was a character in a movie to like go ahead and say yes to, this is it. So yeah, I was really happy to put myself through whatever it was going to take to get there. And it was kind of cool because George showed up to actually shoot it. It was going to be Dave Carson, who was one of the visual effects soups there. He kind of got everything going to the point where it didn't look like maybe George wasn't going to show up, and we had a schedule, so we're going to go ahead and shoot without him. And I was being told, okay, Howie, get in position. We're going to start shooting. Okay, everybody ready? And then all of a sudden, nobody said anything, and I was just frozen for a long time. And I kind of went like, "What's going on?" And Don leaned in and said, "George is here. You can relax." And so I stood up, and George actually sat on the dolly, looking through the camera lens, and we shot the first take. He kind of just said, "Do whatever you're going to do. Let's see what we've got." So I had it in my head. This is perfect circle, that I wanted to do like a Ray Harryhausen performance for this creature. So it was going to be big and powerful and like a gorilla or something. And so I did this kind of like big bow arms, like a bodybuilder, and I was like real quick with my movements and kind of like overly dramatic, like stomping around on the set. And so I heard this voice go, "Cut!" And George walked out onto the set, and he got like 3 inches from my face, and he said, "Can you hear me?" And I actually didn't want to say anything because it would have made it obvious that yes, I can hear you. So I just kind of went like that, and he said, "All right. So the Wampa is a big dumb creature. You think of him like a bear. He's a big dumb bear. He can only think one thing at a time. When he's eating, he's just thinking, I'm eating. And he hears something, he stops eating because he forgets he's eating, and he thinks, I hear something." And so it's like one thing at a time, and he's slow. He's real slow. So let's try this again. So I was like, and so we shot it, and I kind of did the performance almost like I was underwater, like, kind of super floaty, slow. And they just kept shooting. They never turned off the camera. They just kept having me do it over and over and over again. And George would scream, "Slower, dumber." And so I'd do it again, and he'd go, "Slower, dumber." And I was like trying my best to like, what? And moving as slow as I could and like kind of ponderous as I could. And finally, I just sort of ran out of energy. I'd done it like 6 times and was running out of breath. And I stopped and I kind of waved my hands like, "That's it. I gotta get the air back going again for my suit." And I just heard, "That's it. Great. We got it. Wrap." No, I thought was the plan to do it until I collapsed. It's like, that was it. But they got the shot, and I thought, well, okay, well, this is an opportunity. I could actually make a connection with George, and like I could get the head off fast enough. I could say, "Hey, thanks for working with me on this." So I told the guys, "Get the head off, quick." And so Don came out, and they were unsnapping and uncranking, and the thing was actually cranked onto my skull, and I uncranked it and pulled it off. And I looked over where George was, and I was just in time to see the stage door closing, clunk. And I heard his car start up, and boom, he was gone. So
that was a George Lucas story.
No cigar.
Well, he's got one direction, which is faster and more intense, and you've got the complete opposite, which is slower and dumber.
Yeah. So. But as it was, like, when I was doing it, when he kept saying slower, I was like, how slow can it go? Because I was really like just dragging every single motion, like just, widening the timeline by 10, like, okay, really slow. And he got what he wanted, though. I mean, that's how it worked out.
Billy's joined us. Slower, dumber. Your new T-shirt.
Yeah, right. Hello,
was that the end? Did you work on Jedi as well?
No stuff from Jedi. That was right when the transition to computer graphics was happening for me. So I worked on those prequel moments, Men in Black, and then transitioned over to Jurassic Park: The Lost World.
Right. And you did prequels, didn't you? Star Wars prequels. Or you were involved in those?
Oh yeah. But from the digital side, I wasn't working in the model shop at that time. Yeah. Which, looking back on it, I kind of wish I was able to do both, because it was really cool. Like, we were really trying to break new ground in the computer graphics department, working on really, really complex models and like gigantic landscapes that you fly through, stuff that nobody had tried before. And it was also the first movie shot digitally.
Yeah.
And Panavision had made lenses and a camera for it and everything. So it was like really trying to break the mold on that one. But every time I visited the model shop, their stuff was so gorgeous. They had all the pod racers, these giant models spread out over all of these tables on a stage, and you just walk through like it's some kind of museum of relics. They're just so cool. And it was actually inspiring, because we, in the CG department, and in our little dark corners with glowing monitors, we would just do what we thought was cool. That looks pretty good. And then we'd walk over and look at what the model shop had done, and it was like times 10 more detailed and more, more distressed, and just all the coolness factor was like through the roof. And that would get us like, okay, well, we can't stop now. We've got to at least keep going, because these kick ass, and our models, need all the same kind of love. So yeah, it was cool.
I remember that period, because I loved rubber practical monsters, and the Rick Bakers, and the Dick Smiths, and the Tom Salvinis, and all these guys from my childhood. And then I think it was Hook, because I used to get what was the magazine called with the Fangotastic, was it, whatever? Fangoria, that's it, Fangoria. Yeah. And I remember I think it was the Dustin Hoffman Hook, where they started to digitally remove some of the cables, and then I know they had things like The Last Starfighter, and then the new Terminator came out, and this wave of digital came across, and that, it's fantastic, but it lost the magic for me, because it was kind of, the practical effects is great magicians, and then as we move towards digital, incredible visual, amazing, but losing something.
It's sort of like you couldn't resist going to digital, even if you love everything about model building, because as everyone was saying at the time, we can finally reach through the screen and touch the frame and like play with it on a pixel level, and that was irresistible to everyone. So as cool, it was kind of interesting though, is that the model shop got kind of a renaissance period because of digital, because it's hunger to greenlight big effects films, but not everything could be done digitally. There just wasn't the bandwidth inside the computer graphics department to completely create a digital backlot and completely do everything digitally. So, probably extended the model shop's like heyday for another 5 years of just constantly building big crews, lots of stage work, things blowing up, stuff like that. Huge giant landscapes, and anytime there was a gigantic explosion, CG couldn't handle that. So like in the Pirates of the Caribbean, when a pirate ship would blow up, they couldn't handle that any other way. So it all the while like loomed like a giant shadow over model building, but in a way it kind of like reinvigorated it for a long time.
Well, that's what's really interesting now is this: we've gone through the digital revolution. Now we're going back to blending practical and digital, and then in the background you kind of got the internet, and you've got cosplayers and the guys that have got new tools to be able to fabricate stuff that is absolute. Some of the Iron Man things that you see, absolutely immense. So it's kind of it really does seem to get into balance now, where you know, the digital's got its place, practical's got its place, and the two come together to create, you know, what I think is real magic. It's
Right.
phenomenal.
I remember, who was it? Is it Age of Ultron? Which one is that Spider-Man shows up on in the MCU?
That was Winter's. No, it was the last of the third Captain America one, wasn't it?
I am with like remembering all the names, all the names.
The war one.
War. So I remember we were working on Spider-Man's eye, and they wanted to have this eye change shape, and like go squint and get like a little meaner looking and like that. So these like little iris shields were totally
Civil War. Thanks, Billy.
Yeah. Civil War. Thanks. So these like little shields around the edges of the eye were faked in there, and there was a total fake, like the shape of the face and everything. It just, you know, couldn't support in real life some like objects that would suddenly appear and like create these shapes. But it's okay because it's CG. And I'll be darned if like a couple of months after the movie opened, if the cosplayer didn't actually have that actually worked those little shields in his costume. And I showed it to the guy, Bruce Holcomb, who had come up with the shields, and he was like, "Son of a bitch, that's amazing."
I know. We're talking to Matt Denton, who did BB-8, because he same kind of thing. They brought BB-8, and he created the red carpet version of BB-8, allegedly, so he could just go to all the red carpet events because they weren't allowed. And he was saying the same. He said, you know, we roll BB-8 or DO, which is the new one, and you know that within, as soon as that frame hits, you know, the internet and the quality of some of the technology they're doing, you know, they've got to be on the top of the game really to keep, you know, to keep ahead of it.
Yeah, that was. I remember the first time. I think it was was it Celebration? It might have been Celebration, where it was the year that The Force Awakens was opening, and BB-8 rolled out onto the stage. It wasn't, because all I'd ever seen is the BB-8s that had the green rod coming off the outside. That was like most of the dailies that I had seen. That was how it was being done. So when it rolled out onto the stage with the head floating and looking around and performing, that to me, that was like real magic. I was like, holy crap. Is everybody seeing this? It's like actually on the stage, like rolling around, interacting with like the whole Lucasfilm production crew. But then I know it rolled off stage pretty quick. It was like, hey folks, then it was like on an off stage. And I was like, I bet you there were some guys back there like sweating bullets, just like, please don't be ready to cut to B-roll, because, you know, that head floating on there and everything. I think that was pretty dicey, but I think now, I mean, they've kind of got it down. That thing's everywhere.
There's builders are all over the place. There's a number of drives for them. The magnets are terrified in the head. I've got to say, if you get your finger in between those magnets, it will literally it will remove your fingers. But you know, that's what guys are building at home and in sheds, which
that's amazing.
Is incredible.
I remember them talking about the original BB-8, that, you know, there's like this metal frame, and then all the panels, like the hexagonal panels, screw into it, but they weren't completely symmetrical. So you had to know, like, this panel goes onto this part of the frame, and this panel goes onto this part of the frame. You couldn't mix them up. But there were a couple that you could, like a left and a right, that you could mix up. So there were points where we were trying to work on our BB-8 and match everything. And we would go, wait a minute, in this frame, he's got like this symbol, but in this frame, everything else is the same except this one panel, and he's got that symbol. So what the hell's going on? And then we found out, oh, okay, you can take it apart and put it together with reversed panels, and in at least 2 spots. So we thought we were going crazy for a little while, and we had people standing around desks pointing and trying to figure it out. But yeah, it was a great character, especially if you look at the like concept designs, like all the different variations that were possible at the time, and then the elegant final design that they came up with. It was so awesome.
That's incredible. And we've got the new one coming out in December. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I'm hopeful that it's a huge, you know, fist pumping fan gratification film. That's what we need, So it'll have been not just 3, but I mean, we had 2 other films in there as well. So I think we need, if they're saying this is the end of the Skywalker saga, at least on theatrical, then let's have a great one,
Is a tough gig. That is the toughest gig to do that movie.
There's a lot of talking about what is Star Wars, what is and what isn't Star Wars. And I think probably you could do more, go to more worlds, go with more technology. And what kind of holds it together for me is the John Williams original score, lightsabers and Jedis. And then you could, if you've got the right kind of grunge tech, I think, you can go anywhere and do anything in that universe. So I'm very hopeful that they'll keep expanding and going new places and seeing new cool stuff.
There's a mystique as well. It's kind of he calls it space opera, doesn't he? I guess, and it's that. It's not just the universe, but it's the storylines, the myths and legends that sits with it. I think that's what really captured most people's imagination. Anyway, we've stolen a huge amount of your time.
It's okay.
Carry on for even further. Just a couple of questions that Nancy just asked one actually, which is it hard to find people to do quality practical effects these days? So has everybody gone over to CG, or do you find that's coming back now?
There's a lot of really good people out there doing this work now. I think the people that were kids when a lot of these practical effects films were out and they were absorbing them into their being are now out there as really great artists doing stuff that's, as every bit as good as the stuff that they saw when they were kids and stuff coming out. So yeah, I think I actually, there's quite a few shops in LA, at least in the creature world, that are still open, still baking full body suits. And the UK has a kind of a tradition of having a lot of good practical effects people there, and also in stop motion animation, great big teams of people that do that kind of work. So I don't think so. I think that there's fantastic artists out there.
Yeah, no, it's immense. Well, we had Tim Berry on the last one, which was animatronics designer, really. So and I think he was. And of course, in the UK now we've got Disney now own, or Disney have signed up for 10 years at Paramount, at Pinewood, sorry, and then we've got Netflix, the new boys on the block over at Shepperton. So there seems to be a revival.
I think the thing with practical effects is it might be something that's a bit been lost over the years, is that you have to turn your entire production to focus on these effects. They're not like something you tack on to a shot, that like a live action shot, the way you would normally shoot it. It becomes about catering to exactly what the practical effect needs in order for it to be successful. And so that's tough because productions have to make their day. They have actors that are shooting out and leaving at the end of the day, getting on a plane, gone forever. So there's an effect in this moment. Practical effects takes the hit usually. But if you go back and look at films like John Carpenter's The Thing, they were shooting film long after the actors were all gone. And they were like building sets upside down and, drilling holes through walls and things like that. Whatever needed to happen in order to get that 8 seconds of footage, that's what they did. I don't know that there's a commitment on the side of production to do that, because they can always turn to a digital version and not have to spend more time on a soundstage and more crew and B-roll time and stuff like that. But someone once asked me, what do you think's better? You think like digital effects or creature effects or puppet effects? And my answer was always like, well, it's 20 years later. So what would happen if there was no CG but the demand for better and better puppet effects were out there? What would we have now? And some people would say, well, nothing, because nothing really changed all that much during the 80s and 90s. And, having been in that business, I say that's baloney. That there's there's more and more like sophisticated puppets being made, especially like you look at Gremlins 2 with the talking gremlin that was all like computer controlled and everything. I think there's like plenty of room, but it just takes someone has to have the will and the vision to push.
No, it's the control systems. The shift from foam to silicon was a massive improvement.
Yeah,
it's
and it's amazing when there's no alternative, when there's no computer graphics to save the day, how far people are willing to go and how much they're willing to put into something. And the results are always like surprisingly amazing. So, but that's not the world we live in.
Exactly.
It's blended. It's blended.
Was it hard to shift from practical to digital? Because you're on stage and great stories and, you know, things going wrong to, I was just sitting in a dark room moving the mouse around. And I know
it's a completely different kind of process, because you're getting plates from the set maybe, or it could be all digital, but you're typically just dealing with iterations in all departments. So you're doing iterations on your model or your paint or your animation or your compositing, and it's a grind. It's a sausage. You're making sausage basically, you know. And all that really matters is the final effect in the film. It shouldn't matter how you got there, but I like having fun. So being in a shop with a bunch of fun creature guys and shooting on a set with actors, I'd always pick that over sitting in a dark corner clicking a mouse.
No, fantastic. Anyway, I think we need to wrap up. I've stolen huge amounts of your time, but Howie, thank you so much for this. I think we had meaning absolute no disrespect to your previous In the Sheds guests, as they've all been superb, but this is the most entertaining one yet. From the comments. So,
awesome.
So obviously, and the time has gone incredibly quickly. So just before we wrap up, what's next? What you're working on now? What we've been working on in the future?
I am currently working for a company called 2K Games, and they make the NBA 2K basketball game. So we just came out with the latest game. It's just hit the market like 3 weeks ago. It's doing fantastically well. I'm learning so much about basketball. I can tell you, man, it's a world I had no idea. Actually, film could learn a little bit in marketing how these guys what they do with what they've got. But yeah, so I'm already on 2021 working on that game.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, fantastic. And I just got to say sorry, Billy Brooks, who just said hey after mentioning that you're the best shed, because we did actually have Billy as an interview.
Oh yeah, Billy's awesome.
You come second to Billy, if that's it.
I knew he'd say something like that.
No, that's all. Howie, thank you. You've been an absolute star.
Thank you.
Get back to your morning, and we'll get back to our evening in the UK.
All right.
And take care, and hopefully we will see you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye. Bye.